mixed out. This is a good one, interesting one, because according to the event that I attended in the House of Lords, that Hamas is saying that none of the rapes happened because rape is forbidden under Islamic law. Therefore, none of the rapes could happen.
GoPros with them.
Well, shame they documented evidence of said rapes. Hi, Rachel. I wonder why this is a good one, interesting one, because sexual crimes. According to the event to terrorise people in the House of Lords, rule out any negotiation? Hamas is saying that none of the rapes happened because rape is forbidden under Islamic law. Therefore, none of the rapes could happen.
GoPros with them.
Well, shame they documented evidence of said rape.
Women, some of them they raped before they killed, some of them they killed after they raped, and it was absolutely awful. So the question is,
why did they use rape as a tool of war?
Well, because I guess when you have that level of hatred and with misogyny, we're talking about a very extreme jihadi mentality where women really don't have any type of presence or rights. And this is how they conduct their affairs over there. This is what happens in Iran. They're part of the same type of ideology. In Iran, women who show one hair get brutally beaten up and killed and put in jail. I think that Hamas has made it very clear that they have no intention of ever negotiating with Israel, because in their foundational charter, it actually says that the obliteration of Israel is their goal. And so we can't negotiate with Hamas. Having said that, I have many Palestinian friends who believe in peace, who accept the right of Israel to exist, and who would make peace with Israel. Unfortunately, none of those peace activists that I know are in government.
We've got a very, very busy board. Rachel pointing the finger at IDF and Hamas is easily done, but part of the problem must lie with the radical political left in this and other countries.
Absolutely.
That makes life difficult for the Jews. I'm going to ask you to hold on your answer, but I'm just going to put the question and then we're going to go to the news. Does the Deputy Mayor agree? That's from Tony in Penzance. We're going to get to that, and also a question from Ben about how deep anti-Semitism runs, particularly in this country. Are you aware of that too? Fleur, Hassan, Nahum. Thank you for all your calls. We'll get back to them in just a few moments. You're listening to me, Rachel Johnson. I'm taking calls, and I should say Fleur Hassan Nahum is taking your calls and giving very punchy answers to all of them so far. 8:30, let's get some news headlines with Tim Daly.
A relative of a 68-year-old woman mauled to death by two dogs in Essex is being questioned by police on suspicion of dangerous dog offences. Officers are investigating whether the animals, which have now been destroyed, were XL bully dogs. A 17-year-old boy has become the fourth person to be charged with the murders of Mason Brist and Max Dixon in Bristol. Two other people have been charged with assisting an offender. And a £20,000 reward is being offered by police searching for the chemical attack suspect Abdul Azaidi, who was granted asylum to the UK in 2020 despite being convicted of a sexual offence. LBC weather, rain in western Scotland tonight with possible snow in the far north, clear and mainly dry further south with an overnight low of 4 degrees.
LBC.
This is what award-winning customer service sounds like from real Octopus Energy calls.
You've been brilliant. You've all been brilliant.
There's nowhere in the world I would change my supplier. You know, it's what electricity companies should be.
Really pleased to hear that.
Octopus Energy. Outstanding service at fair prices.
Nothing beats a Jet2 holiday. And right now, you can save up to £120 per couple. So, escape to sunny favourites like Greece, Portugal and Italy. And get 22 kilograms of baggage included. Book now with just a £60 deposit per person. Jet2 Holidays. Package holidays you can trust. Up to national protected. Subject to availability and conditions.
My granny visits Specsavers. No chance.
No, my daughter doesn't go to Specsavers.
You're having a laugh. My sister goes to Specsavers.
Specsavers? For my mum, it's out of the question. Dad? Oh, he hasn't been to Specsavers in years.
If your loved ones can't make it into a Specsavers store, it's easy to arrange home visits.
Our opticians are caring and highly trained. To find out if your loved ones are eligible, visit our website.
With Pension Bee, you can combine, contribute and withdraw from your pension online. We helped Hannah bring 5 workplace pensions together into one new online plan.
One of the things that attracted me to Pension Bee was how easy it was to bring all my different workplace pensions together all in one place.
We're building a pension company you can believe in. Pension Bee. Be pension confident. Download the app and get started. When investing, capital is at risk.
Customer service matters. Octopus Energy, recommended by Which 7 years running. Octopus Energy, outstanding customer service at fair prices.
This is LBC with Rachel Johnson. Call 0345 6060 973. Tweet at LBC. Text 84850.
8:33, you're listening to me, Rachel Johnson. I'm sitting with Fleur Hassan Nahum, the Deputy Mayor of Jerusalem. We're taking your calls, texts and tweets. The next question is from Ben in Camden. And Fleur, I'll let you speak to Ben in just a second, but I was saying to you, rather than the world united in support of and defence of tiny Israel, which is surrounded by a lot of hostile Arab states, instead what happened on 7/10 has unleashed an absolute wave of anti-Semitism. Ben, what was your question from the Mayor?
Hi Fleur, nice to speak to you.
Hi Ben.
Hiya. I've been trying in a simple way, much less articulate than you, to spread your message over the last 100+ days since the atrocities in Israel. And I just wondered if you realised how much anti-Semitism there was naturally in this country, but also that has been kind of stirred up by the media by not including the information that you have so articulately spoken about today.
Thanks, Ben. I think that you're right. I think what happens is that the media have a narrative, and the narrative is that Israel can never be the victim. I think it flipped after 1967. I mean, I want to remind everybody, we haven't started one war. We've won all of them because we have no choice. And so I think that we're living in a world where anybody who is successful can never be the victim. It's this kind of woke culture which comes a lot from the left, from the radical left that we spoke about earlier, Rachel. And that answers also your question, Ben. And I think there's basically a toxic combination of Muslim fundamentalism, jihadi mentality, of kill the Jews as infidels, or, as people taking the land that, instead of sharing it, then God forbid that we should actually exist. And with this woke culture, which means that Jews somehow are white colonialists, even though Israel is the best example of the decolonization project of coming back after, hundreds of years in exile, the Jewish people coming back to our ancestral homeland. And this combination of the woke culture that somehow Jews are white colonialists and the jihadi mentality that we shouldn't be there to begin with and Jews are infidels has created this real kind of festival of anti-Semitism, which unfortunately, even before Israel retaliated, even before we attacked Gaza, the victims weren't even cold in the grave when the marchers blaming Israel started. And I came actually on LBC, I think it was a day or 2 days after.
Nick Ferrari.
Yes, with Nick Ferrari, and I reminded everybody that we weren't there from 2005. And so the problem is, Ben, that the world has taken all agency and all responsibility away from the Palestinian leadership. They've infantilized the Palestinian people, which to me is the real racism. And instead of making them responsible for turning down 5 peace deals, if Arafat would have taken the peace deal of 2000, the two-state solution, we would be celebrating 23 years of a Palestinian state. But he decided to go to urban warfare with the Second Intifada, and yet the Palestinian leadership is never to blame. They're corrupt, they're genocidal, they steal from their people, they don't care about their people, and yet it's all Israel's fault. And this ties in very nicely to the left woke extreme mentality, where you have to take agency out of anybody who's perceived to be the victim. And this is what we have.
Thank you very much, Ben. Before I get to the next call, which is next question, which is a tough one. I mean, to what extent do you think what's happened Israel's reaction to 7/10 has licensed anti-Semitism.
The anti-Semitism came up before we even reacted, Rachel. It was the 8th of October there were already marches on the streets.
OK, let's get to Dean's question from Walthamstow. Dean.
Hi, yeah. So basically, Fleur, I had a few questions for Fleur. The first one is the reasons why there's you say anti-Jewish marches, they're not anti-Jewish marches, they're anti-Zionist and anti-Israel marches, is because there's a child being killed every 10 minutes. So I think if you put that into consideration...
There wasn't a child being killed every 10 minutes on the 6th of October, or the 5th of October, or the 4th of October. Who started this? No, there wasn't. No, you've been brainwashed into thinking that Israel is a brutal occupier when in fact we're not even in Gaza.
But you control the water, the electricity.
No, we control 7% of the water. And through the tunnel building, they have rendered the water that they were responsible for, which is 93%, unsafe. That's also our fault. They have no fault. The terrorists have no fault for anything. Is that what you're telling me?
All I'm saying
they're not to blame.
Is being killed every 10 minutes.
But you know how many Israeli children were decapitated on October 7th?
How many?
200 children were killed on October 7th. We have evidence.
You just say 200 children were decapitated on October 7th.
About 40 children were decapitated, many were mutilated, and many were killed. Many were killed. Whole families were killed. Whole families were burnt.
I would suggest the viewers to actually fact check if 200 babies were decapitated or not.
Dean,
I said 40 babies were decapitated, 200 children were killed.
Immediately corrected her figure.
Okay, yeah, thank
This is what they do. They hang on to a misspeak so they can justify keeping the lies going.
Okay, let me just read out this text from Trevor. Manchester says, hello, Deputy Mayor. Nobody likes war, especially in a hot and dusty train. I respect the right of Israel to exist and, yes, thrive. In a fast arming world, how can Israel be that beacon of peace? That's Trevor in Manchester.
You know, Trevor, in 2005, I supported leaving Gaza. It was a very contentious issue. We had to pull 8,000 Jews who had settled peacefully in Gaza. We had to pull them out. They left their businesses behind. And I was in favor of that because I thought to myself, this gives the Palestinian leadership the opportunity to turn this piece of land into something that they can be autonomous and something that they can build. And this could be the beginning of a state. And instead of turning it into Dubai or Marbella, they turned it into Beirut. And they invited Iran, the most radical, jihadi, people in the region. They invited them in. And so again, the world infantilizes, takes all responsibility away from any of the Palestinian leadership. The leadership in the West Bank is corrupt. They're all very, very wealthy people. They have castles and private planes. And the ones in Gaza are genocidal and also corrupt because, their leaders are living in Qatar, the high life in Qatar. Now, if all of you are so worried about children, why is it that the Hamas leadership is hiding under 700 kilometers of tunnel and leaving the children and the women on top? Don't you think it would be a very easy solution to protect the children by putting them and protecting them and hiding them in these tunnels? Why are they leaving the children to the Israeli retaliation when they could protect their own people? You know why? Because like that, all of you listeners out there can be on their side.
Wow. Jake in St Albans, what's your question for the Deputy Mayor?
Hi, I have one for the Mayor and I have two for you, actually.
Okay, Jake. Okay,
I'll
try.
At the beginning of the show, you said that Israel needed to respond proportionately.
Did I?
I've heard this word thrown around.
No, I said that... Sorry, Jake. What I said was...
that the criticism may be...
Israel, in a sense, turned a lot of world opinion, particularly from the left, the university-fed left, who regard, as you so eloquently put it, Fleur, the Jewish state as colonialist oppressors, a completely false narrative.
Yeah.
And they've therefore balanced out. They saw how many people died on 7th of October, and then they contrasted it with the number of casualties that the Hamas-run Gazan Health Authority has said have been killed since. That's what I said. And I said people are balancing those two figures and finding Israel wanting and finding Israel bloodthirsty and disproportionate in its response.
Okay, so whenever the word proportionate is mentioned, it just makes me kind of think, do you expect Israel to do the equivalent of Hamas and go and rape women and burn babies?
Are you kidding?
And create a dance party?
You know I don't,
kill
Jake.
320
You know,
kids?
that's unworthy, I hope, of a question for me. No, because I feel, look, the board is full of callers who feel in their hearts that they care for the Gazan children and they want the shooting and the bombing to stop, and they cannot bear the civilian casualties that have taken place, the thousands of people under the rubble. I have to represent them too. Do you understand?
Okay.
That is why I put this to the Deputy Mayor.
Okay, the other question I have for you is that you also, at the beginning, are mentioning the 30,000 dead from the Hamas-run health authority, but you didn't say the word Hamas-run, and you didn't stress...
I did say.
She did.
I did.
Jay, she did.
I always say.
And I
okay,
reminded
Jake, let's
her
have
that part of them, or a good proportion of them, were combatants, and that's something that the Gaza Health Ministry never even
Jake,
talks about.
now I'm going to let you put your question to the Deputy Mayor.
Okay, so my question is, why do you think that the world picks apart every single bullet that Israel fires when it's defending itself, but they don't do it for any other country?
No. Well, if the world really cared about Muslim or Arab children being killed, they would have cared about the 500,000 Syrians, they would have cared about the 200,000 Houthis, they would have cared about the women and children in Afghanistan. They don't. They only care about it when it's about Israel. And I think that underlying with all of this is an age-old hatred of Jews. And, you know, Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sacks, who was one of the best spiritual leaders in the last 100 years, said that in every generation, anti-Semitism takes a different shape. It's like a mutating virus. And so 500 years ago, Jews were Christ killers. And 100 years ago, by Hitler, Jews were of a lesser race. And now, in a post-colonialist world, we are somehow white European colonialists, even though my name is Hassan, and my family originally come from the Middle East. So there you go. Why? Because that's the way it's always been.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We'll get back to your calls in just a few moments, and I think the next one is going to be Daniel in Birmingham, and it's about a two-state solution, and do you think it can work? We'll get to that. You're listening to me, Rachel Johnson, on LBC. The time is 8:45.
Andrew Marr, Monday to Thursday from 6 p.m. only on LBC.
In terms of the big political unknowns around the world, is the EU really committed to standing by Ukraine as the war goes on? And American politicians seem to be losing faith. Rio Terras, an Estonian MEP, if Russia actually won in Ukraine, Russia would turn and attack you next?
Well, this is always the possibility, and he has shown that every time he uses his military conventional power and he's successful, he goes third.
Andrew Marr, Monday to Thursday from 6 p.m. Listen on your radio and Global Player, the official LBC app.
Granny and Grandpa had their hearts set on getting Jess a drum kit for her birthday. And because they bought it on their Barclay card, they were rewarded too. It was music to their ears. Same can't be said for Mum and Dad. What you buy is your business. Rewarding you is ours. Search Barclay Card to find out more about our range of rewards cards. Barclay Card. Make money work for you. 28.9% APR representative variable. Subject to application, financial circumstances, and borrowing history. T's and C's apply.
This is it.
Level 23.
Final. Let's go.
Let's go.
Guys!
I need power. Turbocharge your gaming and reduce lag with EE Game Mode. Even when everyone's online, this is broadband made for gaming from the UK's fastest major broadband provider. Search EE Broadband, powered by BT.
EE Game Mode requires EE Smart Hub Plus. To verify, see ee.co.uk/claims.
Experience. It tells you that when choosing a Saga escorted tour, you can see more and do more. With our knowledgeable and friendly guides, take in live music at the Grand Ole Opry in America's Deep South, or taste your way through Italy on a grand tour, a feast for your senses. And we always include a VIP door-to-door transfer, so your holiday begins the moment you leave home. Simply search Saga Tours today and book early to get the best prices for your tour. Escorted Touring by Saga. Experience is everything.
For over 50s only. APTA and ATOR protected.
Sounds like someone's lowered prices with their Tesco Club card. Like Tesco Finest Sirloin Steak, now $4.95, down from $5.50. With Tesco Club card, everyone can feel to lower prices. Tesco, every little helps. The majority of larger stores ends 14th of February. Club card or app required.
Hiya. Freezing, isn't it? Wish they'd open the gates.
I think it's even colder in our flat.
That's what the heating's for.
We try not to use it. Can't afford to.
We said the same, but then we found out we could get help.
Really?
Yeah. Check out the London Cost of Living Hub. It's got loads of useful stuff on it, like a benefits calculator. It's really helped us manage the bills.
Cheers. I will.
Londoners miss out on around £2 billion in benefits every year. Don't miss out on help. Search the Mayor of London Cost of Living Hub.
Rachel Johnson on LBC. Call 0345 6060 973.
8:48. We're taking calls. When I say we, that's Fleur Hassan Nahum, the Deputy Mayor of Jerusalem. I'm attempting to answer them too, but she's far more capable and qualified. She's also Israel's Special Envoy for Innovation. And as promised, we turn to the two-state solution. This is something, Fleur, that the British Foreign Secretary, David Cameron, Lord Cameron, has been floating. Must have been passed by Downing Street as fit for consumption. So Daniel in Birmingham, would you like to put your question?
Yes, I will. I'm a former fellow of the Ministry of Defense, of the Defense Research Agency, and we studied the origin of conflict. And one theory was by Gunnar Heinsohn, that is a late Gunnar Heinsohn, he's a sociologist, that when you divide the number of older people by the young people by the old people, and it's more than 3, it's called the War Index 3, you can't have peace, because the youngsters try to take the job. They're competing for jobs, and that's what happened with Fatah and Hamas when you left.
Can we get to your question, Daniel? Because we've got a full board,
Okay. I don't believe the two-state solution can work because there's too many youth in Gaza, and they fight each other, which is exactly what your interviewer mentioned when Israel pulled out. So why does she believe that the two-state solution can work? It can't.
Well, that's a very depressing thought, that we're going to be stuck in this conflict forever. Really, it's very depressing for me. I'm a mother of 4 children. I'd like to think that they can live in a generation where they can have peace. Now, the problem with the two-state solution is that we've tried it many times. We tried in 1936, the British government, actually the Peel Commission, tried to present that to the Palestinian leadership. They said no. In 1948, the UN presented it to the Palestinian leadership. They said no. Israel said yes. And then we had a war on our hands. In the 90s, we started a peace process in Madrid, which culminated in 2000 when a two-state solution was offered to Arafat. He said no, and he started a second intifada. In 2009, Ehud Olmert offered Mahmoud Abbas a two-state solution with everything he said he wanted, 98% of what he said he wanted, and again, it was rejected. So when people ask Israel about the two-state solution, I always say to them, why don't you ask the Palestinians? Why don't they want a two-state solution? You would think that they would. You would think that they'd want to give their people some type of a horizon of a better tomorrow. But unfortunately, they're so preoccupied with destroying the idea of Israel, destroying the country of Israel, that they're not focused on building a country for themselves. And Tony Blair was out in Israel for about 10 years trying to do peace building in the West Bank, in Gaza, and he really put everything into it, and he did not succeed. And so the question, if we had a Gandhi to make peace with, I would say a two-state solution would be really a great idea. Living side by side, being good neighbors, we could be so prosperous together, really prosperous together. Unfortunately, the problem here is ideology. And the ideology is that they haven't yet accepted that Israel exists and it's not going anywhere. And I always say, if everybody just accepted that nobody's going anywhere, then that is the beginning of peace. Unfortunately, the majority of the Palestinian leadership, and that's what they tell their children in their school book, and that's what they tell the media, and that's how they talk in Arabic, they have not accepted the fact that Israel exists and is not going anywhere. The minute they do, we will have the beginnings of peace.
But how wouldn't the beginnings of peace take firmer shape if Benjamin Netanyahu himself didn't always push back against the notion of a two-state solution?
Well, when Obama was president, he actually came out and declared that he had accepted the doctrine of a two-state solution. So that's not...
He being Netanyahu?
Yeah, Netanyahu.
Well, he's changed his tune, hasn't
Well,
he?
then Obama, I remind everybody, thought that he was going to solve the whole problem and, made Netanyahu freeze settlements for 11 months, and the Palestinians wouldn't even sit at the table.
But, Daniel, just let me give you some bid polling, which I'm sure Fleur knows as well. When the Palestinians and Israeli Jews have been polled on support for two-state solution, the last, I think, poll was taken place at the end of October 2023, so after the atrocities. The two-state solution had the support, I'm not sure of the verification of this, 71.9% of Israeli Arabs and 28.6% of Israeli Jews. It doesn't obviously have the poll from the Palestinians in Gaza or the West Bank.
Well, no, they're 95% no. But look, that's not the point. I think that if there was just the type of leadership in the Palestinian leadership that accepted the fact that Israel is there, not going anywhere, that we can share, that ideologically they've accepted our existence as a fact, we would have peace. The government of Israel has always, look at our record, every single Arab country that has wanted peace with Israel has gotten it. Jordan, Egypt, the UAE, Bahrain, Morocco, even Sudan, and now we're even talking about Saudi Arabia. So whoever wants peace with Israel gets peace with Israel.
Well, obviously, Saudi was normalising relations with Israel before 7/10. Let us hope that something does emanate from either Qatar or the Saudi side to restore that normalisation
I don't have much faith in Qatar because they're playing a double game, but I think Saudi is on board.
Right, we've got another question, and this one is from Idris in Camden. Idris. Hi there.
Hi, good evening.
Good evening.
I have a question about the recent incidents involving the IDF bombing of hospitals and refugee camps. I mean, I understand this intractable conflict has been going on for decades, and I support Israel's right to exist and to defend itself unreservedly. But there's some concern about collateral damage. Could you shed some light on why these specific sites were targeted and whether the collateral damage is deemed justified in the effort to eliminate a small handful of perhaps several Hamas fighters within those locations?
Sure. So, unfortunately, what we've discovered since October 7th is that Hamas has installed the majority of its terrorist infrastructure under civilian infrastructure. So the hospitals, actually the main Al-Shifa hospital, had an enormous headquarters of terror dungeons right under it, and many of the other hospitals as well as mosques, as well as schools, even UNRWA schools, UN schools, all have been used by Hamas cynically to hide the infrastructure of their terror. I mean, I've spoken to so many experts. They found in every single hospital room, they found rockets stashed in cupboards, even under baby incubators. Sickening the things that were found there, the way that they cynically use innocent children, innocent people. And so Israel is very, very careful of where it bombs. We have a whole team of lawyers that is there to approve every single attack. And let me tell you, legally, if a civilian infrastructure, civilian facility is used for terror, is used for military facility, then it becomes a legitimate military target. And it's not just several terrorists that have been in these places. And this is what the numbers that you don't hear. Israel, in terms of the proportion of civilian to combatant rates, it's got the best proportion of any modern war that you can possibly imagine. And when they say the 20,000 are dead, what they don't tell you is that 10,000 of them are combatants.
I mean, yeah, I understand, but wouldn't it have been possible to perhaps go in and clear those sites out?
You're right. You know, we've lost 250 young men because we could have carpet bombed the whole place, honestly, but we didn't, because we do care for civilian casualties, because we do abide by the rule of law, and so we put our own soldiers, our own young men, my friends' children 19, 20, 22-year-old boys who go house to house, booby-trapped houses, booby-trapped children, booby-trapped rooms, only because we don't want to indiscriminately destroy entire buildings. And the buildings that you see have been destroyed, we have sent warnings to the people living in those buildings to get out because we're about to destroy the infrastructure, the terror infrastructure in those buildings.
Thank you very much. I should point out that the rate of children's death in war is apparently 6 to 8%, but in Gaza, 42%, according to the Hamas-run health authority. Wait, no, because I just want to... That's a lead-in to this text about children.
Yes.
From Ryan in Manchester. It's not about children in Gaza. It's Israeli forces had arrested as many as 880 Palestinian children last year, reported by The Times of London, many for throwing stones. When will Israel release these children held in prison? Ryan in Manchester.
Okay, so by children we mean 17 and 18 and 16-year-olds, right? Kids who are throwing Molotov cocktails, who are stabbing people. These are not innocent young men who've thrown a pebble. The stones that they're throwing are opening heads and actually damaging people and leaving them very, very, very injured. It's GBH, we were talking in UK legal terms. We actually released a ton of them in the last hostage deal. Most of them were minors, many of them in my city, Jerusalem. And let me tell you that now we have social workers with each of these children so they don't go back to a life of radicalization. And so, yes, we would, if these so-called children who are essentially 16, 17 violent-year-old boys, I remember when that poor little baby, Jamie Bulger, was killed, right? It was two 12-year-olds who killed him, 14-year-olds?
Yeah.
Well, those innocent because they're children, murderers are murderers. And people who are causing damage are causing damage. And unfortunately, they are radicalized by the environment that they're in. And the real challenge is how do we create an education of peace?
Right, well, we've decided to continue with these calls to Fleur Hassan Nahum for about another quarter of an hour, and I think I would like you to answer one about the hostages after we get to the 9 o'clock news, which is what happens if they don't give the hostages back, Hamas. You're listening to me, Rachel Johnson, on LBC. The time is 9 o'clock.
On your radio, on Global Player, and
Play LBC.
Leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom at 9 o'clock. The Prime Minister says he won't hesitate to protect British lives after a third wave of joint UK and US airstrikes against Houthi positions in Yemen. Rishi Sunak's been defending the attacks against the fighters who've been targeting international shipping in the Red Sea, calling them self-defense. But the former CIA officer, Michael Shower, has been telling LBC the current attacks won't do much.
It'll hurt the Houthis in the sense it'll kill some people and it will destroy equipment that they're using. But the Houthis are much like the Afghans. They're just not going to quit. They're going to keep fighting and find ways to hurt you that are sometimes ingenious.
A 17-month-old girl and a 50-year-old man have died in a car crash in Lancashire. It's after a collision between a Land Rover Discovery and a Mini Cooper in Tarleton earlier today. Police are offering a £20,000 reward to catch the Clapham chemical attack suspect. Abdullah Zaidi hasn't been seen since a woman was left with life-changing injuries on Wednesday evening. He was granted asylum to the UK in 2020 despite a sexual offence conviction. The Metropolitan Police says an officer seen wearing a Boycott Israel Apartheid sticker while on duty at a demonstration had it placed on him without his knowledge. A statement says it was removed quickly by a member of the public who'd seen what had happened. Deputy Mayor of Jerusalem, Fleur Hassan Nahum, has been telling Rachel Johnson on LBC it's wrong to portray Israel as the villain in the Middle East.
Every single innocent life is a loss. But who is responsible for that loss, if not their own leadership who started this war? Did they expect Israel to sit and let them attack us again? Would the UK do that if their neighbour attacked them?
Police in Essex say the breed of the two dogs which mauled a woman to death in Jaywick is still unknown. The animals were destroyed and a relative of the 68-year-old's being questioned. on suspicion of dangerous dog offences. A 17-year-old boy's become the sixth person to be charged in connection with the murders of Mason Wrist and Max Dixon in Bristol. The pair were stabbed in Knowle West last Saturday. And in sport, Chelsea have regained their 3-point advantage at the top of the Women's Super League thanks to a 3-0 win at home to Everton. Manchester City were briefly in first place following a 2-0 victory over Leicester. LBC weather, rain in western Scotland tonight with possible snow in the far north, clear and mainly dry further south with an overnight low of 4 degrees. From Global's newsroom, for LBC, I'm Tim Daly.
This Sunday evening, and as the hour really kicked off, we're going to keep Fleur Hassan Nahuma hostage. I hope that's not an insensitive way of putting it, with us for another quarter, because some of the questions that have come in are very, very pointed, apposite, and are eliciting some very, very fiery answers. Before I get to the question that I trailed just before the news about what happens if the hostages are not released. Fleur, I want you to comment, to reflect on this comment that you created a lot of controversy with back when you were last on LBC on the 19th of December when you had this exchange with my breakfast colleague Nick Ferrari.
Why is it necessary, it is reported, to start shooting, having snipers outside a church?
I saw the reports this morning. The church, there are no churches in Gaza, so I'm not quite sure where the report is talking about.
There's a Catholic church in there, isn't there, that is...
Yeah, unfortunately there are no Christians because they were driven out by...
Well, respectfully, there are Christians because I spoke to an MP yesterday who has family members in the church who are Christians.
Fleur.
Yes. Well, I apologise for that, by the way. Look, what I really did meant to say is, and there's really no freedom of religion in Gaza. You have to understand that. It's like Iran. And so there used to be 5,000 Christians there when Israel left Gaza in 2005. I've spoken to many Christian leaders, especially after that interview, because, yes, I dismiss the fact that there's a couple of hundred left. But they can't practice their religion freely. Not only that, you know how many Christians got in touch with me who had left Gaza after that interview to tell me that their father was killed, their uncle was killed, their a Christian bookstore was burnt to the ground by Hamas.
Christian. They were killed.
Christian.
Okay.
And so, yes, it was inaccurate to say there's no Christians in Gaza, but what I meant to say, and I apologized afterwards for, was that there really is no freedom of religion. There's a handful, a few hundred from what there used to be. And let me just give you another statistics. In Bethlehem, right, which is the birthplace of Christ, right, before Israel left it to the authority of the Palestinian Authority, when Israel occupied Bethlehem, there were 85% Christians in the city. Today, there's 10%. That is the difference between Israel sovereignty and Palestinian sovereignty in a certain place.
Okay. Israel is much more ecumenical in its approach to different creeds and religions. We're diverse, we're pluralistic,
we believe in everybody having freedom of worship. We sanctify that, we preserve it, including Muslims on Temple Mount. We facilitate 100,000 Muslims every Friday of Ramadan.
Turn left.
People should just walk around Jerusalem. And if all of these callers who think that we're so evil would just walk around Jerusalem and see how everybody's living freely, I think they would have a very different opinion.
And also, you haven't mentioned the fact that there are 2 million Arab Israelis.
There's 20% Arab Israelis who are in the highest levels of society, judges, doctors. I think there's more Arab and doctors and pharmacists than Jewish ones now.
Let's get to the hostage question from Ryan in Manchester, which is... No, sorry, it's Alex in Enfield. Please ask what happens if they don't give the hostages back? What happens next? How long will they, i.e. the IDF, Israel, continue to bomb? Because they are very unlikely to give them back. Alex in Enfield has in a back channel to what Hamas is going to do.
Well, I think Alex is right. These people don't want to release the hostages because they're the only thing keeping their leadership, from being gotten rid of. I don't want to think about it, Alex, because I've got a friend whose son is a hostage. He's 23 years old and they blew off his arm. And I made two friends, two mothers, who 30-year-old and 25-year-old daughters are there. And there's all sorts of reports on rape. And the mothers actually came to me because they want there to be a deal now, because it's been 18 weeks and they think if they've been raped and they're pregnant, then this is the time to pull them out and get them to have an abortion. And so these are the kind of Sophie's choices that Israel has at the moment. What do we do? And we were all kind of dreaming for a Raiden and Tebby style rescue, but with 700 kilometers of tunnels, bigger than the London Underground. I think that's very unlikely. I don't want to even begin to think what will happen if we can't get our hostages back. I don't want to think about it. It's an open wound that will never close in Israel.
We've got a first-time caller to LBC who's got a question about the geography. It's Felix in Merton. Felix.
Hi. So, I remember when I was a child in school, one of my friends was Palestinian, and he showed me on the map the country. It said Palestine. And a few years later, it's changed to Israel. Now, we know, the winners write the history books, and, statistics on both sides.
So what's your question, Felix? Because we're running out of time.
So the question is, what do you say about, in my living memory, I remember seeing Palestine on the map.
Felix, there was never a Palestinian state. Let me tell you what there was 200 years back, okay? There was an Ottoman Empire, and then they sided with the Germans in the First World War. And in the and after the First World War, the whole territory was given to the British. It was a British mandate of Palestine. There was never an independent Palestinian state. And in fact, the Palestinian people as a people is kind of a relatively new thing of the last 100 years. Many Jews call themselves Palestinian 100 years ago. Golda Meir called herself Palestinian. The main paper run by the Jews there was called the Palestine Post. So it was a British mandate, and the reason why the British got the mandate was to actually help the Jews usher in a Jewish state. And the Jewish state originally was going to be all of Israel, the West Bank, Gaza, and Jordan, and eventually whittled down. And they said, okay, so Jordan will be, it was called Transjordan then, Jordan will be for the Palestinians and Israel will be for the Jews. And then even that was whittled down, and they said, all right, let's cut Israel in half, and half for the Palestinians and half for the Jews. We said yes to all of those offers, and the Palestinians said no to all of those offers. And so whoever's telling you that a Palestinian state exists, just Google it and you'll understand that it's a complete lie.
Thank you, Felix. Morris in Salford. Hello, Morris.
Hi, thank you so much to both of you for doing this very, very important show. My question is, how can you explain how people who call themselves friend of Israel, like David Cameron and President Biden, now want to reward the Palestinians for those atrocities with the state?
Well, I think that there's been this kind of conventional wisdom, both in the State Department and the Foreign Office here in England, that somehow if you have a two-state solution that solves all the problems, and they stopped talking about a peace process and just started focusing on two states. Now, we already have three states. We had Gaza, which was its own statelet. We have the West Bank, which is responsible for 94% of the Palestinians. That's a statelet too. And then we have Israel. And so I don't think that's the essence of the problem, and therefore I don't think that's the essence of the solution. But I do understand that President Biden and Cameron, they want to help, but they just have this conception that this will be what will solve the problem. And you can't force the Palestinians to run a state that they have not, as of now, managed to run with the territory that they've been given. So I don't understand who's actually going to run it. And I keep saying this. It would work if we had a Gandhi, if we had a Mandela. Sadat from Egypt, who made peace, was a first brave Arab leader to make peace with Israel. If we had a Sadat on the Palestinian side, I would feel very different about a Palestinian state. And let me just tell you...
And a Begin on the Israeli side.
And yes, but any Israeli leader would make peace. They tried, okay? Everybody blames Netanyahu. They tried, many different governments have tried, and the Palestinians have said no to every single opportunity to create a state. And so now, and also there's this other conception that, that the people who start an aggressive war and they lose shouldn't pay the price. So what incentive, what deterrence is there to not start an aggressive war if you're going to give people prizes?
I'm afraid we've got another question that's come in about these so-called genocidal conversations that have been taking place within the Israeli government. This is from Nadine, a new caller in Bath. To you, Fleur. Nadine.
Hi, Fleur. I think a bit earlier, a caller called in to discuss some quite shocking statements that were made by Ben-Gvir only days after the ICJ ruling. Your response was that the government doesn't agree with those statements.
That's right.
Said ministers. How do you realistically and truthfully expect to conduct any type of peace process when a national security minister and member of the war cabinet makes statements which incite and promote ethnic cleansing?
Well, let me just tell you that the Prime Minister said the very next day that whatever statements were made by Ben-Gvir does not represent government policy. Now, there is a security cabinet, but there is a smaller security cabinet which actually makes all the decisions. And Ben-Gvir is very purposely not in that smaller kind of kitchen cabinet that makes the decisions of war. Now, I'm not going to sit here and defend Ben-Gvir. He's not my cup of tea. But I will say he's not the guy making the decisions, and I'm happy about that.
Does that answer your question, Nadine?
With all due respect, I mean, you pride yourself on being a democratic government, and, there are various statements made to that effect. But if you were to compare yourself to another democratic government and you had a minister making similar statements, do you think that those...
Well, let me compare myself to the UK.
Government?
Well,
please do compare it to the UK.
Let me tell you what happened last week with Cameron. Well, last week Cameron talked about a two-state solution, and Rishi Sunak said it didn't go through Downing Street. So there you go.
I think those are two really different things. I think talking about a political solution and comparing that to statements which incite ethnic cleansing, those are two completely different. They're completely different kettles of fish. I don't even think you can compare the two.
Well, it's about one democratic, but you talk about a democratic system. In a democratic system, you can't control everything that every single minister says. You cannot control that. The Labour Party has many people who say very insightful anti-Semitic things, and it doesn't represent Keir Starmer.
And I completely agree with that. However, I will make one key difference here, is that in a democratic state, if you had ministers who made such statements, they would be immediately recalled. They would be, there would be some sort of issue, and there would be a public outcry, and they would be punished in some form, in some kind of way, or they would be removed from government. They would not remain within the government and be able to make such statements and continue to promote violence.
Well, unfortunately, you've had a lot of MPs in the Labour side of the aisle who've made very incendiary anti-Semitic comments.
And a lot of them have had their whip withdrawn by Keir Starmer.
Well, the only thing I will say is that that Ben-Gvir is not included in these major decisions, and perhaps that's his punishment. And a lot of people in Israel are outraged.
And of course, Jeremy Corbyn, a former Labour leader, is no longer a member of the Labour Party. So that
really?
Yeah, the Labour leader has come down like a ton of bricks on any expressions of anti-Semitism or inflammatory statements. So she had a point.
No, I'm happy to give her that
and
point.
Also, but you said
I don't want to sit here and defend him. I really don't.
Ben-Gvir's not running the country.
He's not running the country, and thank God for that.
Well, I mean, I think that's probably your lot, because you've got another appointment to get to, Fleur. And,
thank you, Rachel.
It's been hectic, and I think you've covered an awful lot of ground very calmly. I hope that people feel that this has been a useful exercise. I'm incredibly grateful for your time.
Well, I'm always happy to have conversations. The main thing is that we shouldn't cancel each other. We should keep talking, because that's the only way forward.
Absolutely. Otherwise, both sides become unreachable.
Exactly.
And there will be no path to peace. But I feel very, encouraged by the fact that you're prepared to listen to these callers, to answer their points. Some of them were inaccurate. Some of them are accused you of being inaccurate. You've remained calm, you've marshalled your facts, and you've put your case. Fleur, thank you very, very much. Deputy Mayor of Jerusalem, for your time this evening. Well, we are going to change the subject after the break, and that's going to be social media and the safety of our children, as the mother of the murdered teenager has called for mobile phones to be banned for under-16s, particularly the use of social media. And we've got an interview with the Conservative MP, Miriam Kate, coming up. You're listening to me, Rachel Johnson, on LBC. I thank Fleur Hassan Nahum. The time is 9:17.
This is LBC.
Every year, thousands of people lose money in investment scams.
I wanted to make my savings work for me, so I found an investment company online. My investment looked like it was doing well, so of course I gave them more money, but the problem started when I tried to withdraw it. They stole £30,000. When CEL called to say they'd recovered every penny, my wife and I just cried.
We help recover money from the financial system that's failed you. Visit celsolicitors.co.uk today.
Thank you for your business loan application, Mr.
Myers.
Ah, yes, Myers, of course. I'll have to pass this on to the Director of Hesitation.
The what?
Who will then send it to the Red Tape Committee. Where the President of Procrastination will then have...
Luckily, business loans from iWalker come without the tribulation. No wait, no faff, and a decision when you need it. See how we can help your business at iWalker. That's iwoca.co.uk. iWalker, hassle-free loans for small businesses.
At Kia, we're switching on the Kia Power On event, showcasing our award-winning electrified range, featuring our new electric 7-seater Kia EV9 with a range of up to 349 miles, and our stylish hybrid SUV, the Kia Sportage. Get 2 years free servicing when you order by the 29th of February. Ready to switch to an electrified SUV? Search the Kia Power On event. Take the lead. Drive electrified. Kia. Movement that inspires. T's and C's apply. Free servicing offer available until 29th of February. Range based on test conditions and may vary.
At Specsavers, we've got hearing aids that can stream music or movies. Ones that are good in crowds. Rechargeable ones, battery ones that are good at home. Ones that are good in the great outdoors. Invisible ones that connect to phones. Ones that fit in your ear, ones that fit over your ear. Ones that fit in wherever you happen to be. Why so many? Because everyone's hearing is different. And how everyone spends their time is different. Hearing aids can make a big difference. So book a free hearing test. You're better off at Specsavers.
Rachel Johnson on LBC. Call 0345 6060973.
The time is 9:19, and I'm changing the subject. The Deputy Mayor of Jerusalem has left the building. I want to change up the subject because another very important issue has arisen. You may have heard the ineffably dignified mother of the murdered teenager, Brianna Jai, who spoke today. She said, amongst other things, that she thought there should be a ban on social media apps for all under-16s. I mean, really, we could spend hours, days, weeks establishing with our parent cohort how hard this would be. But I think this is a good moment to ask all of us, our families, our friends, ourselves, honestly, and interrogate this, which is, how has social media, the endemic addiction, and I put my hand up, addiction to smartphones affected our children and our mental health? Do you agree with Esther Gajai that children under 16 should be banned from social media? I mean, I don't need to tell you, because we've all seen the news, that children have been murdered or taken their lives after consuming content on Instagram or Snapchat or the dark web, being bullied on these apps and these sites. So my question, as we go into an interview with Miriam Kate, the Conservative MP for Penistone and Stockbridge, is how have you been affected by social media apps, smartphone addiction? Has it changed your life in the way that it so tragically changed the life of the Jai family? 0345 6060 973. You can text 84850. You can tweet at LBC. Miriam Cates, MP, joins us now. As I said, you're the Tory MP for Penistone and Stockbridge. You've written passionately about this subject. I've got your piece in front of me, Miriam. The scandal of our screens. What is the scandal in your view? Thank you for coming on.
Good evening. No, it's nice to be with you. I think the scandal is just the scale of the problem and how it is consuming our children. And don't forget, this is a very new problem. I mean, just 15 years ago, children didn't have smartphones. None of us really knew what social media was. We might have joined Facebook and shared a few pictures of cats. But we had no idea how this was going to take over our lives and, sadly, the lives of our children. And I think from some of the tragic cases that you've just mentioned, Brianna Jai, but also Molly Russell, there was an inquest into a death of another girl, Mia Janin, last week, who took her own life. But it's not just the extreme cases, it's also the everyday. And if you look at any measure of teen mental health and well-being, whether that's visits to hospital because of self-harm, whether that's feelings of inadequacy and feeling purposeless or loneliness, all of our teenage mental health, all of those measures have just collapsed since 2010. So
2010 being the common... just to remind everyone, 2010 is the established date for when the smartphone became kind of commonly used, whereby you could access, obviously, the internet and apps online on a device that was as powerful as a home computer that is in the palm of your hand, that has been called, Miriam, a lethal weapon.
Yes, and clearly it has been for many children. If you look at some of the self-harm content that is served up to children, for example, on Instagram, you know how Instagram works. Once you look at something, once you show an interest in something, Instagram deliberately feeds you more and more of that content. That is their business model. Now, obviously, if you're looking at recipes or something like that, it can be very useful. But if you're being drawn into really dangerous content or violent content, clearly this warps teenagers' minds to the point where they can do awful things. But it isn't just the extreme content, whether that's violence or pornography, which has become an enormous problem, especially for teenage boys. It's also just the addictive nature of it. And I think I saw some research. The average teen receives 237 notifications a day. That's a dopamine hit every 4 minutes. I mean, that is an addiction by any measure. And so, of course, while I understand that calling for, let's say, a social media ban for under 16s might seem extreme, it might seem a big move, I just don't see what else we can do to save our children from what has become, a real danger to their safeguarding.
You've pointed out in your own article that this ban has already taken place in Florida. Is there any evidence to show that it's working, that it can be enforced in the southern state of the United States?
Well, that law's only just been passed, so the answer is don't know yet. Don't know how that will be effective. I think the way that this should work is the responsibility has to be on the social media companies not to allow anybody under 16 to join their platform.
How? Sorry, I know that gambling sites have a age verification. Can a similar age verification be done with children when... OK, but they don't necessarily have a credit card. How would they do it, Miriam?
The tech companies absolutely have the technology in order to be able to do this. So, for example, YouTube decided to be responsible and kicked off, I think, tens of thousands, perhaps even hundreds of thousands of under 13 accounts off their site. So they know they can use AI to work out the kind of words you use, the kind of topics you're interested in, to know your age very precisely. They do know the age of these children. And the whistleblower who used to be a Meta executive, Arturo Bejar, he was in Parliament a couple of weeks ago, and he talked about how Instagram Meta absolutely do know how many children under 13 are on their sites, how many 13 to 15-year-olds on their site. They do have the power to do this. And I think what we're starting to realise is that these big tech companies are a vested interest, the size of which the world has never really known before. Some of these companies have bigger GDP than almost all countries in the world, bigger worth, than the GDP of almost all countries in the world. They are huge. They can do this, but they're not going to. Only governments and passing new laws can actually stand up to these vested interests. And that's why there has to be a role for government, for legislation. And I'm completely sympathetic to people say this is the parents' job. I am the last person in the world to advocate for nanny state. But parents cannot stand up to the might of big tech without some help from regulation and some help from government. And I think we've reached the point where we've got to go down that route.
So are you really saying that these tech giants regard the deaths of children who've been sucked into the dark web or have watched things that have completely warped their brains, have committed suicide, who've committed murders, the deaths of those children are the cost of doing business?
Well, using our children's data and drawing them into addictive social media sites is absolutely part of their business model. They are aware of the harms. That's become clear in the congressional hearings this week when some of the emails were read out between Mark Zuckerberg and some of his executives. They do know the harms, but sadly they have shown themselves over the last 5 or 10 years that they're not willing to act. We passed the Online Safety Act last year in this country. That was quite a big piece of legislation. It's not fully enacted yet. In theory, when it is fully enacted, it will put huge fines and potentially even prison sentences on, say, social media bosses who fail to protect children. But of course, they have a lot of lawyers, they have a lot of money. This isn't going to be straightforward. But we have, that is a step forward, that will be a step forward. But I think even if we did get all the horrendous content off social media or not for under 16s, we still have this problem of addiction. And, I mentioned it just before, I think one of the biggest problems on the internet at the moment for children is pornography. The Children's Commissioner did a study last year that showed the average age that a child accessed hardcore pornography for the first time was 13. This is changing the way that children think about sex and relationships, and we've just seen now that 50% of child sexual abuse is actually committed by other children. So this is another factor of having the internet in your pocket that sadly can't just be outlawed by a few restrictions here and there. It has become an addiction again. And so I think